And Plattsburgh's Mayor Chris Rosenquest joins us now. It's good to see you.
Hey, Tom, how are you?
I'm well. We just heard from the city's environmental manager and the health department. The consensus is the water is safe and okay to use.
Yes.
Tests have shown no bacteria, no E. coli, no heavy metals. It appears the discoloration is coming from silt and sediment that's in the storage tanks.
Yeah, so going back to when we first heard about the problem and tracking it down, and it's a challenge because it's hundreds of miles of pipe, it's millions of gallons of water, and we see pockets of it. And so when we see something pop up, we're like, okay, well, what's going on here? And is it isolated or is it, citywide? We did see an increase of sediment in the tank. That increase of sediment was being pulled out of the tank. The question is, how did the increase of sediment get in there? There's still an ongoing discussion and process. There's a lot of tests that have gone into that, testing of the chemical, testing of the water. But yeah, at this point, we pulled all of the water out of the inner tank, did a confined space entry into the tank, cleaned it. We're now filling that with fresh water, testing that water as it goes in to make sure that as it's in there for a while and things settle out. But at the same time, part of the cleaning of the system is flushing the system. So we're in neighborhoods, we have different zones that we open the fire hydrants up, we flush the system, and that process, the nature of that process also creates this turbidity in the water and this turbidity in the system that people may see discolored water. Again, we've worked very closely with New York State Department of Health, Clinton County Department of Health, identifying the problems, even the messaging that we've sent out. We can't just send out a message that says the water's fine if we know the water's not fine. So we've been working very closely with those folks to make sure that we're delivering safe water.
Have you been able to identify anything in particular that needs fixing?
Yeah, so the assumption right now, the hypothesis right now that we're chasing down is a change in chemical supplier. There's a chlorine process that we put the water through to kill bacteria. There's an assumption that with a chemical change, there was a potential that chemical wasn't sufficient for our use, and we didn't quite catch it until after the filtration process.
And of course it affects a lot of people, and so there's been a lot of talk on social media about all of this. Last week, John Rolfe, the chief engineer, chief environmental manager, went before the city council and explained a lot of this. Is that video that perhaps would answer a lot of questions for folks?
That 100%, and that's the, when we were able to take a step back and follow the process and find the issue itself, it allows us to answer a lot of these questions versus just giving out hypotheses and rumors, which it's not something that we want to do. And like I've said from the beginning, people should be concerned about their water. When you turn on your faucet and brown water comes out, yes, be concerned and let us know.
You want to hear from folks. We've put up a number on the screen right now, email and the phone number. If they continue to have discoloration problems, the city does want to hear from them. Let them know.
100%. Some people are seeing it for multiple days. Some people are seeing it for a couple hours. So that's why it's hard to track down.
Been about 6 weeks now, but really probably impossible to guess how much longer it'll take to flush it out and hope for everything to return to normal.
Yeah, especially with the zone flushing, we're going to put out before the end of the week's over, we're going to put out an update on the zone flushing. We know when we're going to start doing that. So we're looking at mid-October before we can flush the entire system.
The City Council voted this past week to move ahead with a study into demolishing the Crete Civic Center.
Yeah, so the council approved the consulting contractor to do the demolition analysis, what it's going to take, as well as a price out for that demolition. Once those bids come back, then we vote on the bid and then the funding mechanism for how to pay for that piece. So right now we're kind of halfway through that process of demolition of the Crete, but there's still more to come before the council.
You believe the cost of maintaining the Crete has simply just gotten to the point where the city can't afford it. It's throwing money away.
Yeah. I go back to 2007, and the city has spent roughly around $2.5 million in expenses just to keep the building open. We've lost about $500,000, operated that building in the red, in the negative. It's hard. It's a difficult decision to make, and it's an emotional one. That's not lost on me. And I know a lot of people who say, well, I grew up here and I learned how to skate there and I taught my kid how to skate there and I played hockey there and I played soccer. And it's emotional, and I know that it's emotional. I know it's a piece of our identity, the Crete Center is. When I was elected, one of the biggest things that I heard in that election was the city needs to be run like a business. And there is some truth to that. So when I look at this facility and I look at it operating in the negative, and I look at all of our other parks and tearing out playground equipment at Hamilton Park and not having a functional playground at South Platt Street, at Fox Hill, I have to weigh the benefit of throwing hundreds of thousands of dollars into a facility that maybe 300 of our city residents use versus taking that same money and investing in our parks elsewhere. And it's hard, because I know that these kids who play soccer in the wintertime, they need a place to play. But I also know that these kids on the South End and at South Platt Street and Melissa Penfield Park, they're struggling to even find a place to play.
The parents of many of the kids who use it, and you mentioned about 300 kids from Plattsburgh, there's hundreds of kids from surrounding communities.
Sure, absolutely.
Many parents would like to keep it open at least one more year. Many of them came to the tour that you offered a couple of weeks ago. At least $350,000 seemed the likely price tag to address the issues and get it reopened for maybe 1 year. And has there been any word? Have they started efforts, and is there any sort of a movement underway to try to raise that money? And have they come to you to say, we're going to try to meet this goal and keep this open another year?
I have heard nothing since then. My position has been, if any organization comes to the city of Plattsburgh and says, okay, we'll take over every single expense to run this facility, please do. Please do it. I will step out of the way. We'll postpone demolition. We'll figure out, 2 years down the line, how do we solve regional recreation, indoor regional recreation, especially in the wintertime, and we'll figure that out. But again, we just haven't heard from anybody that has really stepped up and said, yep, we've got it, we're going to do this, and this is how we're going to do it.
Ultimately, if the Crete does come down, are you in favor of the city looking to sell or lease that property? Perhaps for a lakefront hotel or something along those lines?
That's a good question. And again, it's one of those things, do we want to sell off the city beach for what benefit? I don't know. I don't think that that would be the wisest thing to do, just because it is waterfront property, it's parkland as well. It's an option. It's even an option that I put in the memo that I sent out, a 9-page memo or so that I sent out regarding, hey, here are some options that we can talk about, none of which I'm gung-ho about, none of which I'm, I got my horse on that, my money on that race kind of thing. And it's one of those things where we can talk about it. If that makes the most sense for us to do something like that, then sure, let's explore it. But again, it's one of those rumor things where Rosenquest has a developer in his back pocket that's waiting to swoop in and develop the city beach. It's just not accurate.
By the way, the memo you talk about, that we've been putting the link up on the screen, so folks, if they haven't read it already, can go read that. Is it possible that a better option may be developing the site as a redesign of the beach? You're looking at a nature center, you're looking at an amphitheater there. Is it possible that if the Crete goes away, that opens the space up for some of the plans that the city's been considering?
Yeah, and we do go back to the 2016 waterfront feasibility study that was adopted by council. Back then, one of the critical questions of that study, clearly outlined in the RFP, was, what do we do with the Crete? Right there up front, what do we do with the Crete? And at the end of that study, multiple people had participated in that. It consolidated about 12 different studies into one. And at the end, it said pretty clearly, open recreation. Return the property back to open recreation. What does that mean? Walking trails, which we started last year, tearing down buildings and reclaiming some of that property, which we started last year. We tore down the Anderson building and the Northern Bathhouse. We started to clean up the boardwalk, clean up the beach. We did a lot of that technical analysis that we needed to do, the landfill delineation, wetland delineation, multiple geotechnical borings to figure out what's under the ground around the beach. We did an archaeological study. We did a historical study. We did a lot out there in preparation for what is next for the beach. I think more than anything, we want to start with a blank canvas to then go back and say, yeah, this is appropriate. Let's start from scratch. Let's start from scratch. And is an amphitheater the best use of it? I don't know. I really don't. I look at the plan and I say that a lot of people put a lot of time and effort and energy and thought into this. It seems like it makes sense. I think that we may need to explore it a little bit more. But there are some things in that plan that make perfect sense. So we need to take a look at the beach more as a destination attraction and less of a sunbathing site. And what does that mean? what does that mean for the city beach? Not to say people don't go out there and bathe in the sun. We want them to. We certainly want them to come to the beach, but we also want people to come to the beach for entertainment, to play, to shop, to go to restaurants, to walk around and enjoy nature, and we want that for our beach as well.
Mayor Chris Rosenquest, thank you.
Thanks,
Appreciate
Tom.
it.
Appreciate it, man.